In a farmer's field in southeastern Turkey, there's a temple older than the wheel, older than pottery, older than farming itself. It's called Göbekli Tepe, and when archaeologists finally excavated it, they found something stranger than the temple itself. Someone had deliberately buried it. Not lost, not collapsed. Buried on purpose by the same hunter-gatherers who built it, thousands of years before anyone invented a written language to explain why. That's coming up at number 1, along with 9 other real lost cities that archaeologists have spent the last few years actually solving. Not ancient aliens, not lost super-civilizations. Real excavations, real LiDAR surveys, real radiocarbon dates. Let's start the countdown. In the winter of 1850, a storm tore across the Orkney Islands off the coast of Scotland. Wind and high tides stripped the grass off a coastal mound near Skara Brae, and when the storm cleared, a local landowner named William Watt found something underneath. Stone walls, stone furniture, stone beds. An entire Neolithic village that had been sealed under sand for roughly 5,000 years. It's called Skara Brae, and radiocarbon dating puts it in use between 3,200 and 2,200 BCE, meaning it was already ancient history by the time the Egyptian pyramids were being planned. A second storm in 1926 exposed even more of it, and serious excavation began the following year under archaeologist V. Gordon Childe. What makes Skara Brae remarkable isn't just its age, it's how completely intact it is. Stone dressers, stone box beds, even what looks like a stone-lined larder are all still standing, giving archaeologists an almost unheard-of window into ordinary Stone Age domestic life. It's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it exists purely because one 19th-century storm happened to hit the right patch of coastline. 2 kilometers from the main square of Cusco, Peru, sits a wall made of stone blocks so massive and so precisely fitted that you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. And some of those blocks weigh up to 125 tons. This is Sacsayhuamán, an Inca complex whose construction began under the Emperor Pachacuti around 1438 and wasn't finished until roughly a century later under Huayna Capac. Getting there took the labor of more than 20,000 people, quarrying and shaping stone with nothing but wood, bronze and stone tools, then moving it into place with log rollers, ropes, levers and earthen ramps. No mortar, no wheels, no draft animals capable of hauling that kind of weight. The zigzag walls stretch over 1,000 feet, and some of the stones stand more than 27 feet tall. Historians know who built it and roughly how long it took. What still generates real academic debate is the precision, how a Bronze Age-level toolkit produced joints that tight, at that scale, on stones that heavy. It's not a mystery of who or when, it's a mystery of exactly how. In Ireland's Boyne Valley sits a mound older than Stonehenge and older than the Great Pyramids. Newgrange, a passage tomb built roughly 5,000 years ago by Neolithic farmers. It sat quietly for millennia until 1699, when a landowner named Charles Campbell had labourers digging on his newly purchased land and stumbled onto it by accident. But the site's real secret wasn't found until 1967, when archaeologist Michael J. O'Kelly rediscovered a sealed opening above the tomb's entrance, a roof box, and realized what it was for. Every year, on the winter solstice, the rising sun shines directly through that opening and travels 19 meters down the passage, flooding the inner chamber with light for about 17 minutes. A 1989 astronomical study confirmed it wasn't a coincidence. Stone Age farmers with no writing system had engineered a tomb to align with the sun's exact position on the shortest day of the year, and gotten it right to within a few minutes of arc. O'Kelly was the first person in 5,000 years to watch it happen. Great Zimbabwe is the largest ancient stone structure in sub-Saharan Africa. Granite walls over 200 meters long and more than 10 meters high, built without mortar, housing as many as 20,000 people at its peak. Construction began around the 11th century CE by Shona-speaking peoples, the direct ancestors of Zimbabwe's Shona communities today. That should have been the end of the story. Instead, when European explorers reached the site in the 19th century, they refused to believe Africans had built it. Colonial-era figures like Karl Mauck credited it to the Phoenicians, or even the biblical Queen of Sheba, anyone but the people who actually lived there. It took until 1929, when archaeologist Gertrude Caton Thompson led an all-female excavation team to the site, for the record to be set straight. Radiocarbon dating placed construction centuries after Phoenician civilization had already declined, and the artifacts recovered matched regional African traditions, not Mediterranean ones. The mystery of Great Zimbabwe was never really an archaeological mystery. It was a manufactured one, and it took decades of real evidence to undo it. 900 years ago, across the Mississippi River from present-day St. Louis, a city called Cahokia was home to as many as 50,000 people at its metropolitan peak. One of the largest urban populations on Earth at the time, larger than London was in that era. By 1400, it was essentially empty. For decades, the leading theory was drought, a prolonged dry period that wrecked crop yields and forced a mass exodus. But a 2024 study published in the journal The Holocene, led by Natalie Mueller of Washington University in St. Louis and Caitlin Rankin, complicates that story. By analyzing carbon isotopes preserved in the soil, the researchers found that Cahokians were eating a varied diet: fish, birds, deer, bear, wild fruits and nuts, resilient enough to survive a single failed harvest. If drought alone isn't the answer, something else drove tens of thousands of people to leave a thriving city within a generation. And as of this research, archaeologists still don't have a confirmed replacement theory. Cahokia's exodus remains one of the most studied unsolved questions in North American archaeology. For decades, Easter Island, Rapa Nui, was the textbook example of a civilization destroying itself. A society that cut down every tree on the island, triggered ecological collapse, and doomed its own population. A story popularized by writer Jared Diamond. New research from the University of Arizona directly challenges that narrative. Rather than spiraling into overpopulation and collapse, the evidence now suggests the Rapa Nui people adapted. A detailed survey of the island's rock gardens, a clever technique using broken volcanic rock to protect sweet potato crops from wind and improve soil retention, shows an agricultural system sized to support a small, stable population for centuries, not a boom-and-bust cycle. A separate study published in the journal Nature analyzed the genomes of 15 Rapa Nui individuals who lived between 1670 and 1950 and found no genetic signature of a population crash. Researchers have also pushed the timeline for the island's famous Moai statue building into the period after European contact, later than previously assumed, undercutting the idea that the statues themselves caused the island's ruin. The ecocide story wasn't a lie exactly. It just wasn't supported by the evidence once anyone actually went looking for it. Angkor, in what's now Cambodia, was the capital of the Khmer Empire from roughly the 9th to the 16th century, and at its height it was the largest pre-industrial urban settlement on Earth, larger by area than modern-day Los Angeles. Its defining feature was water, a vast engineered network of canals, moats and reservoirs that let Angkor support a huge population in a region with brutal wet and dry seasons. French archaeologist Bernard-Philippe Grosselier first proposed decades ago that this same hydraulic network eventually became the city's undoing, and modern LiDAR and radar mapping surveys have confirmed it. Researchers have identified more than 1,000 man-made ponds and at least 74 previously unknown temple sites across roughly 1,000 square kilometers of ruins. Geoarchaeological evidence now points to a gradual decline rather than one sudden catastrophe. Severe droughts in the 14th and 15th centuries, followed by periods of catastrophic flooding, overwhelmed a water system that had become too vast and too rigid to adapt. The data even suggests Angkor's ruling elite may have started leaving before the infrastructure fully failed, watching the system that built their empire come apart around them. On the Greek island of Santorini sits the buried city of Akrotiri, sometimes called the Minoan Pompeii, a thriving Bronze Age port town buried under volcanic ash when the Thera eruption tore the island apart around 1600 BCE. It was first discovered in 1860 by quarry workers cutting volcanic rock for the Suez Canal, but it wasn't properly excavated until 1967 when Greek archaeologist Spiridon Marinatos began uncovering multi-story buildings, elaborate frescoes, and even a working plumbing system, evidence of a sophisticated trading hub connected to Crete, Egypt, and the wider Near East. But the detail that separates Akrotiri from Pompeii is what's missing. No human remains have ever been found at the site, not one body in a town-sized eruption zone. The leading explanation is that the people of Akrotiri had enough warning, likely from earthquakes and other precursor activity, to evacuate before the eruption actually hit. Pompeii is famous for the people it froze in place. Akrotiri may be just as remarkable for the people who got out in time. In 2024, a Tulane University PhD student named Luke Auld Thomas was digging through old research online when he found a LiDAR survey that a Mexican environmental monitoring organization had conducted years earlier and essentially forgotten about, buried on page 16 of a search results page. When he ran the laser scan data through analysis software, out of curiosity more than expectation, an entire lost Maya city appeared, hidden under dense rainforest canopy in the Mexican state of Campeche. Researchers named it Valeriana. At its peak, between roughly 740 and 850 CE, it may have housed 30,000 to 50,000 people, a larger population than the same region has today, with more than 6,000 individual structures identified, including pyramids, plazas, a bull court, and causeways connecting different districts. It's now considered one of the densest Maya cities ever discovered, and it was found not through a new expedition, but by one grad student noticing a decade-old public dataset that nobody else had bothered to fully analyze. Since then, the wider Tulane-led survey effort has identified more than 6,500 Maya structures across the surveyed region, suggesting there's a lot more still sitting in old, unexamined data, which brings us back to Göbekli Tepe. Located in southeastern Turkey, it's roughly 11,000 years old, 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, and it predates agriculture, pottery, and writing. It was built by hunter-gatherers, which by itself upended a lot of assumptions about what pre-agricultural societies were capable of organizing. But the detail that makes it genuinely strange is this. At some point, the people who built it deliberately backfilled the entire site, burying their own temple under tons of earth and debris. Nobody has a confirmed explanation for why. It sat buried and protected for thousands of years until archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began serious excavation in the 1990s, and the site has kept producing surprises ever since. Recent geophysical surveys have mapped at least 15 more undiscovered monumental structures and over 200 buried standing stones still sitting beneath the plateau, unexcavated. In 2026, archaeologists announced the discovery of a life-size human figure deliberately embedded into a stone wall between two of the site's main structures, adding yet another layer to the ritual practices researchers are still trying to piece together. Göbekli Tepe isn't fully excavated, it isn't fully explained, and by the survey data alone, most of it is still in the ground.